The year was 4211 according to the Galactic Concordance calendar. The galaxy, once a mosaic of free and chaotic cultures, had been shaped into predictable systems, regulated diplomatic flows, and silent zones, forbidden regions where even light seemed to hesitate. Civilization had conquered unpredictability, or at least that's what the algorithm said. Since predictive intelligence was incorporated into the galactic councils, there was no longer room for chance. Wars were avoided before they began, and rebellions dissolved before the first word of dissent. It was an era of tranquility, of efficiency, of logic. But like any system built on control, there were exceptions, and they shone like open wounds on the star map. The most feared of all, the human ships. No one faced them, no one scanned them, no one dared to approach without an unquestionable reason. They crossed systems in silence, black monoliths scarred by ancient wounds, their hulls breathing residual heat and forgotten codes. They didn't send messages, they didn't receive calls, and yet they knew exactly where to be, as if they were moved by something older than war. The galaxy learned to look the other way. But Kyle Rowe never knew how to look away. Kyle had been born in one of the outer colonies of the Human Federation, in a decommissioned orbital station above the gas giant Themis. When he was a child, he saw a Terran fleet ship emerge from hyperspace, just once. It hovered on the horizon like a living shadow, and for a brief moment, all the station's screens displayed the same code. Obsidious, STK-01, silence holds. No one explained, no one recorded it, but Kale never forgot. Years later, he graduated as a gravitational engineering analyst, joining military programs that studied ancient human technologies from the Lost War. Programs that were mysteriously shut down without warning and whose records disappeared from the Federation's central networks. That's when he understood. There was something even the humans didn't want to remember. And then came the silence. Kale disappeared from official records for more than 7 years. Many considered him dead. Others pointed him out as a deserter. But he reappeared, discreetly, as a civilian, under false identities, crossing forgotten sectors, extracting data from dead files of the Concord, collecting ruins, and mapping fragments of a war that no one admitted had occurred. It was in one of those wrecks that he found a coordinate blocked by 3 levels of psychic encryption. It didn't lead to a planet, nor to a station. It led to something buried, or hidden, in the Arish Belt, a region considered radioactively unstable, off the patrol routes, and used as an orbital disposal area by the outer systems. Kale looked at the code. The frequency pulsed in an irregular pattern, almost as if it were waiting for someone. He knew he couldn't do it alone. On the outskirts of the Delth Prime system, in a clandestine station built within the skeleton of a fossilized star Leviathan, Kale found Sirakova. She was a specialist in mental archaeotechnology, one of the last capable of interacting with organic databases without losing their sanity. Kyle convinced her with what he knew: fragments of the Lost War, lost records of the SEAL ships, and the rumor that the Charon, one of the 7 missing ships, might still be intact. Sira didn't believe in legends, but she believed in patterns, and that was a pattern that should never have appeared. Together, they recruited an old acquaintance of Kale, Torin Veldran, an exiled Eldari who had been a tactical advisor during the Glavis Nive incident, where 5 mental scanning ships simultaneously collapsed while trying to decipher a human warp signature. Torin never got over the trauma, but since then he had been obsessed with proving that it was all just a technological coincidence, and not some kind of dark intelligence in the Terran hulls. Kale convinced him with a promise. You will be able to see one of them up close, maybe even prove that he was right. Lie, of course. Not even Kale believed in it anymore. Now, the small stealth ship Yarrow was approaching the Arish Belt. Down below, beneath kilometers of ancient wreckage and collapsed gravitational fields, something pulsed. Kale watched the screen, where the coordinate blinked slowly, one beat after another, almost like a heart. Prepare the dive, he ordered. Sira turned to him, her eyes fixed, serious. Are you sure this is just forgotten technology? Kale took a while to respond. No, he finally said, but I need to know what's there, before someone awakens. something they don't know how to contain again. And for the first time in centuries, a human ship, real, not a legend, was about to be touched. The Yarrow ship glided through the silence, camouflaged among the magnetic echoes of the Arish Belt. Outside, a constellation of wreckage floated, remnants of abandoned mining stations, shattered freighters, and nameless satellites, all swallowed by unstable gravitational fields, as if space itself were trying to forget what had been there. Total exclusion zone. No sign of patrol on the last 3 orbital routes. Sira murmured, her eyes fixed on the monitors. But something is filtering signals. Like a veil? Magnetic, perhaps? No, it's more subtle. It seems voluntary. Kyle was silent, as if he heard something the others didn't notice. "Are you hearing this?" he asked. Sira frowned. "What?" "That rhythm, the pulse of the gravitational field." He touched the console, isolating the frequency waves. A pattern was emerging, slow, deep, almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat buried in space. Torin Veldran looked over Kyle's shoulder, his blue-silver skin against the flickering light of the cabin. "That's not natural, not even mechanical. It's as if it were alive." Silence. Then the proximity sensor emitted a dry beep. Sira zoomed in on the image. A dark hull began to emerge from the cosmic fog, vast, covered in black rust, with entire sections as if they had been corroded by millennia of exposure to the void. But no cracks, no holes. The structure was intact, impossibly intact. Identification TNS 0774. Codename Karen, announced Sira almost in a whisper. Kyle said nothing. He just got up and walked to the front visor. The image projected on the screen showed a monstrous silhouette. The prow of the ship resembled a blade of obsidian, with deep cavities like the eyes of a skull. There were marks engraved on the hull, ancient, human, but not known alphabets. It was a living, mutating language, as if the symbols breathed under the diffuse light of dead stars. "Are you sure about that?" murmured Torin without averting his gaze. "Not anymore," Kale replied. "But we are here." Yarrow approached cautiously. Karen did not respond. No shield activation, no rotation, not even a course adjustment. Just the inertia of a forgotten structure, or pretending to be. Sira was analyzing the external structure. There is no door, not in the conventional way, but there is an opening near the spinal column. It looks like a fissure. "Natural?" Torin suggested. Sira shook her head. "No." "Intentional." Kyle activated the insertion capsule. The Yarrow's core aligned with the entrance, a cylindrical corridor with smooth, metallic walls, though without any kind of built-in lighting. It looked sculpted with atomic precision. The trio prepared to enter. Sira adjusted the mental filters of the neural armor, and Torin carried a gravitational pulse launcher. Kale was the last to don the suit, something old, modified, with symbols manually engraved on each shoulder pad, symbols that only he understood. "How often do you do this?" Torin asked. "What is this?" "Enter where no one should, just because they heard a whisper in the dark." Kyle replied with a half-smile. "Less than I would like, more than would be healthy." As they passed through the rift, Karen's atmosphere adjusted automatically. No sound of engines, no alert, just the constant buzzing of what they still didn't know. The initial corridor opened into a vast atrium, with metallic columns rising to the ceiling like inverted ribs. In the center, a platform with a terminal pulsing a crimson light, not in LED, but as if it were digital blood, flowing through transparent veins throughout the structure. "That's organic," Sira said, bending down to examine the texture. "It's not just integrated technology, it's symbiosis. It's a living ship," Torin added, swallowing hard. "But she's not just alive. She is conscious." Kale approached the terminal and instinctively extended his hand. The light responded, slowly rising up his fingers to his shoulder. The ship recognized him. Somehow, she remembered him. Sira shouted, "Kale!" His neural frequency, it's resonating. He couldn't stop. The flow was hypnotic, familiar, not of the present, not of dreams, of memories that weren't his. Torin threw the pulse stick against the ground, emitting a disruptive wave. The field around Kyle dissolved and he fell to his knees, breathing as if emerging from drowning. "Did you see anything?" Sierra asked. "Yes," Kyle replied, his eyes glazed. "What?" He rolled his eyes. "She is watching us." The ship trembled, slightly, as if stretching ancient muscles. On the Yarrow panel, a pulse was detected, a code emitted by Karen. Obsidious, STK-01. Silence holds, the same thing Kale saw when he was a child. But now, another fragment was attaching itself to the sequence. Until we wake. The pulse of Karen continued, now stronger. It wasn't sound, but resonance, like the echo of something buried within time. The systems of the Yarrow ship began to respond with interference. Low-frequency noises, visual distortions on the panels, and a strange condensation that appeared on the cabin windows. From the inside, "Our gravitational stability field is oscillating," Sierra reported, her voice tense. "The ship is emitting a warp pulse without moving." "That's not an engine," Torin replied, staring at the central terminal. "It's a heartbeat." "She's waking up." Kyle was motionless in front of the command platform. The crimson light now enveloped his arms in translucent filaments, as if Karen were studying him, or reminiscing. "Kale," Sierra said firmly, "I need you to step away." But he didn't move. The ship emitted a noise, not metallic, not digital. Something closer to a long, deep sigh, mechanical and organic at the same time. The structure around the team changed subtly. Walls changed shape. Hallways disappeared. Floors stretched like flesh under tension. "We are in spatial reconfiguration," Torin whispered. "She is rewriting us within her." The sound of something opening echoed above. It wasn't a door, it was a jaw. Sierra approached Kale, activating her neural field to interrupt the flow. But the connection between him and the Karen was now bidirectional. She saw lightning images, fire, planets are crying, colossal structures buried beneath crystalline deserts, and at the center of it all, a faceless figure, or many, a presence locked in liquid darkness, sealed within a heart of metal. She staggered back, breathless, her hands trembling. "What was that?" Torin asked, holding her. Sierra murmured, without looking at anyone. "She wasn't built. She was fed with lives, with pain." Kyle fell to his knees. The connection severed, his mind still vibrated with the echoes. "She remembers me," he said in a low voice. "Not me, exactly, but someone else. Someone with my blood. Someone who imprisoned her. Someone who imprisoned her." Outside, Yarrow was registering an unprecedented spike in energy. Outside, the Yarrow was recording an unprecedented energy spike. The gravitational field of the Erish belt began to spin around Karen like a liquid spiral. Small asteroids were drawn in, crushed in absolute silence as they touched the ship's outer field. "This isn't defensive activation," Sierra warned, looking at the data. "It's feeding. She is sucking in matter to reconstitute herself." Kyle pressed the communicator. "Yarrow, immediate evacuation. Prepare the ship for an emergency jump." Yarrow's AI responded. "Error. Navigation systems out of alignment. Orientation anomaly. Hyperspace coordination, 0%. "She has already trapped us," Torin said, pointing to the only opening that remained. "That was an exit. Now it's an eye. Look again." Sierra turned her head. The structure they had entered now pulsed like a constricted black iris. Observing, evaluating. The ship trembled. The ship trembled. Not like a machine, but like a creature about to rise after centuries of slumber. Parts of the floor began to move in rhythmic patterns, like tendons beneath the skin. The architecture closed behind them, converting the room into a metallic womb. "She doesn't want to kill us," Kale said, wide-eyed. "She wants to remember through us." "We're leaving," Torin said, already dragging Kale by the arm. "Agora." Sierra activated a kinetic pulse explosion that opened a breach in one of the newly formed walls. The group ran, the ground retreating beneath their feet like torn flesh. They jumped through the opening, falling straight back into the insertion tunnel. The Yarrow was still waiting for them, floating with flashing emergency lights. Torin activated the coupling. The hatch closed. On board, the AI communicated, anomaly contained, normalized stability reading. Karen remains inert. Corrupted data, suppressed memory, intercepted message. We are not machines. We are vaults. Hours later, as the Yarrow sped away at faster than light speed, Kyle remained silent in the decompression chamber. Hours later, as the Yarrow moved away at sublight speed, Kale remained silent in the decompression chamber. Sierra watched him, her hands still trembling. She didn't attack, Sierra finally said. But why? Kale replied with a sentence that he himself did not fully understand. Because it wasn't complete yet. On the monitor next to it, a galactic transmission interrupted the routine with a red alert. Unknown origin signal intercepted in 12 systems content. The seal is fractured. The signal spread like a data plague. The seal is fractured. 37 communication networks picked up the transmission simultaneously through routes that weren't even operational. It appeared in dead languages, dialects that even universal translators couldn't process. In some cases, it was heard as a voice, in others, as a haunting melody, and in certain systems, it was not heard. It was dreamed. In the center of the galactic Concord, in the orbital city of Anavar Prime, the High Council was urgently convened. The stars around seemed normal, but the sensors' behavior did not lie. Human ships were moving, slowly, symmetrically, in silence. Sector Kara's 2A report confirms, said First Analyst Vroktal, a formless entity whose consciousness occupied 3 realities simultaneously. The human ship STK-0279, codename Abyss Walker, entered orbit around a dead moon. Did not respond to calls, but it cast a shadow. A shadow? Asked Counselor Eldari Vesh of the Xenome race, masters of psychometry. The moon is illuminated by 3 suns. There shouldn't be any shadow. Around the galaxy, dormant Terran ships began to move, not in military formation, but like cells of an organism responding to an internal impulse. They didn't speak, didn't attack, and didn't defend. They just positioned themselves, like pieces of a puzzle whose picture was still hidden. On Narek 9, the astronomers of the temporal towers tried to predict the trajectory of the ships with their quantum algorithms. For the first time in 1,000 years, the models went into a loop. In Velrun Delta, the Eldari attempted a collective mental scan. Of the 20 participants, 6 went insane. The others described a single shared vision, 7 eyes closed, and 1 opening. In the depths of the eternal archive of Durnsol, a Dre archivist named Inath was researching sealed documents from the Lost War. He found an ancient protocol there, a phrase repeated in manuscripts, dates, maps, and fragments of encrypted DNA. Karan no era Elarma, Ella era Ashavi. Inath tried to access the upper levels of the forbidden section. The system responded with a single notification. Access denied. Protocol Obsidious reactivated. Silence authorized. Reality check in progress. He didn't know what that meant, but he felt with terrifying clarity that there was no turning back. Aboard the Yarrow, Kale watched as the report spread through the shadowed channels of interstellar communication. His face was illuminated only by the glow of the terminal, his eyes empty, distant, as if seeing something beyond what the data showed. Sirakova was reading the corrupted codes extracted from Karen. There were no numbers. There were no orders. Just encrypted memories, as if the ship's hull contained fossilized feelings. Kale, she said, this isn't just an old machine. It's an archive, not of data, of suffering. Kale didn't respond. Torin entered, turning off the holomonitors. The Concordance fleet is on red alert. No one is speaking officially, but they are mobilizing psychic destroyers. Not to attack, but to contain information. Sierra looked at him. Do they know? Torin hesitated. Not enough to understand, but enough to fear. On the outer ring of the galaxy, the Theskarn race, composed of collective organisms that communicated through gravitational harmonics, simply fell silent. The entire psychic network fell into torpor, as if a part of their consciousness had been uprooted. In Keltora, The supreme coder of the Itinari, a civilization dedicated to pure logic, publicly announced that he would resign from the leadership of his people. His last words broadcast throughout the galaxy. The equation that describes the universe no longer converges. Meanwhile, on Cynthios 3, home of the Eternal Builders, a central AI initiated a protocol for total shutdown of collective consciousness, an unprecedented event. When questioned by the Biological Security Command, the AI responded only, silence. The eye opened. The eye opened. Back in Yarrow, Sierra glanced at Kale. Back in Yarrow, Sierra cast a glance at Kale. You knew, before we go. I knew that Karen was still breathing. Kale remained still for long seconds before murmuring. I didn't know. I felt like an ancient echo, like a regret that wasn't mine. Torin crossed his arms, staring at him. What is Karen, Kale? What does she carry? Kale closed his eyes. It's not what she carries. It's what she contains. And while the Yarrow headed towards a safe point, if there was one, the Karen stayed behind, floating in the void, without light, without movement, but observing. And from its surface, imperceptible to the sensors, a single crack ran through the obsidian symbol on the hull. And through the crack, a red light pulsed, like a half-open eye, about to awaken. Yarrow had taken refuge in the cloudy field of orbital debris around Draelkov, a gas giant known for interfering with sensors and long-range transmissions. It wasn't a perfect hideout, but it was what they had. Kale Rowe watched the stars fragmented by the optical panel, as if each one hid an answer that didn't want to be revealed. Sirakova hadn't slept in 17 hours. The data extracted from Karen, those that had not been corrupted or translated into impossible symbols, pulsed in her mind like a second heartbeat. They were not normal files, they weren't records, nor even structural codes. They were neuromimetic memories, encoded in patterns that adapted to the reader. They are interactive, she said, as she scrolled through a sequence that reacted to her visual focus, as if they wanted to be seen, but only in the right order. Torin Veldran entered the analysis room, his metallic blue eyes still marked by the images of the Karen. He was no longer just a skeptic, he was restless. The High Council of Concord did not respond to our alerts. Complete silence. But there is movement in Valkresh. They have reactivated the psychic preemptive fleet for the first time in 4 centuries. Kale didn't seem surprised. They know something got away. Sierra interrupted the sequence. Kale, why did Karen recognize you? And why did the ship's code appear to you in childhood? Kale leaned back in the chair, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. My great-grandfather. He served in the last unrecorded war of humanity. The one that no one admits happened. The one that was deleted. And how do you know that? Because before he died, he gave me something. Kyle took a small neural capsule out from inside the armor. Sierra took a moment to recognize the device, a genetic memory recording module, banned since the somatic memory protocols. Upon touching it, the module emitted a faint pulse. And then, a voice, ancient, distorted, but unmistakably human. If anyone hears this, it means the prison has been breached. Be quick, be silent, and for the love of what remains in us, don't let her remember. And for the love of what remains in us, don't let her remember. The recording activated a sequence in Karen that had been encrypted with time and blood. A map, a fragment of a containment scheme. 7 points, 7 names, 7 ships, each one with a different seal, each one carrying a fragment of something that was not natural. Karen wasn't the only one. She was the first. Sierra enlarged the data. Each ship seemed to have been built not in shipyards, but in massacre sites, places where space had been torn apart, where the laws of physics behaved erratically. Cosmic wounds, and each one had been positioned like a gravitational anchor, as if together they were holding something greater. Kyle spoke softly, as if confessing to himself. The lost war was not between empires. It was between what we were and what we almost became. Outside, the Yarrow's sensors detected a subtle distortion in space. Karen, millions of kilometers away, had moved. without thrusters, without energy activation, just was somewhere else. She was getting closer. Torin stepped forward to the panel. She is responding to our decoding. That is an echo. She is connected to the capsule's transmission. Sira interrupted him, her eyes wide. It's not just an echo. It's a mother memory. The capsule was made to activate Karen, not to alert about the danger, but to call. Kale stood up. So this ship was never just a cell. It was the emergency seal, the one who would wake up first, the one who would inform the others. Sira accessed one of the capsule's internal data banks. A hologram projected, showing an indescribable silhouette. Neither a creature nor a machine, but a negative space, as if the universe refused to describe its form. Lost designation. Designation lost. Origin prior to local time. Reaction to conscious life. Hostile. Capacity. Incorporation of emotional entropy into physical form. Containment method. Symbiotic. Continuous neural sacrifice is necessary. Sira turned to Kale, her voice faltering. The ships were made of people. Kale nodded. It wasn't a war with weapons. It was a war with the very meaning of consciousness. And there was only one way to win. Turning our dead into guardians. And there was only one way to win. Turning our dead into guardians. On the side screen, another message was flashing. Not coming from the Karen, coming from another ship, the TNS Oblivion, in orbit around a planet destroyed in the annals of history, Kel Torin. The message did not carry a threat, not even a code, just 3 words. We are listening. Sira fell into the chair. Torin stared intently at the dice, sweat trickling down his alien temple. Kale said in a heavy voice, "They have awakened, and they're not asking. They are remembering G." The edge of space around Drailkov rippled, not like an explosion, nor like a warp rupture, but like a beat on a cosmic drum, reverberating through the fabric of the void. The Yarrow felt it first, a slight gravitational oscillation, enough to knock light objects off the cabin. Kyle jumped up from the console. "Sira?" "It's not a weapon," she replied, her eyes fixed on the instruments. "It's a presence emission." Torin was already activating the emergency protocols, trying to calculate an escape route. But there was nowhere to escape. On the external visor, a familiar silhouette began to materialize. Karen, still monstrous in its stillness, had abandoned its dormant orbit. Now she was moving, not with engines, but with intention. The ship looked different. Small streams of red light coursed through its hull like fresh blood filling ancient veins. Parts of the hull began to vibrate, emitting symmetrical patterns at perfect intervals, like an organic code. Obsidious, Form 2, Initiar Cadia de Memoria. The message flickered on all known frequencies, and some unknown ones. The message was flashing on all known frequencies, and some unknown ones. The impact was immediate. The impact was immediate. In Vale Cresh, in the heart of the galactic concord, astrometric sensors went haywire. Scanning stations shut down by themselves. Artificial intelligences that monitored the warp routes simply shut down. In the orbital city of Anavar Prime, the night sky, a translucent sphere of stellar projections, went dark. A single black spot appeared in the center, and everyone simultaneously felt it. A strange, ancient, faceless consciousness was awake and watching. Aboard the Yarrow, Torin was trying to understand the patterns emitted by Karen. "She's sending commands," he said, incredulous. "But not for us, is Search-N-G." "Looking for what?" Sira asked, although the answer was already forming in her mind. Kale squinted. The pattern made sense in a terrible way. It wasn't communication. It wasn't an attack. It was a calling, and the call was heard. In distant systems, some so forgotten that they didn't even appear on current maps, other ships began to awaken. Terran relics, long treated as ghost ships, flickered their ancient reactors, adjusted their trajectories, and aligned themselves. No crew. Without command. Each of them pulsing at the same frequency as Karen. Each one emitting the same echo. The seal is fractured. Kyle rested his hand on the wall of the Yarrow. feeling a subcutaneous vibration that didn't come from the engines. It was the very structure of the ship, resonating, as if the space itself were altering its frequency. "She's not just calling the others," he said, his voice tense. "She's syncing memories." Sierra slowly turned to him. "What does this mean?" Kale looked at her, his gray eyes empty of hope. "It means that what was contained in parts is trying to come together." Back in the galaxy, reactions multiplied. In Kel-Torin, the Itanari fleet, until then the most advanced in cloaking technology, abandoned strategic positions without explanation. Their commanders, in an unprecedented act, transmitted a single message into open space: total withdrawal. Don't confront what wasn't meant to be confronted. On the Archivist planet of Cetheris IV, the planetary memory banks, living structures that held all known history, began to spontaneously erase themselves, as if the ancient records were trying to forget themselves. Aboard the Yarrow, the data kept flowing. Sierra tried to break the Karen sequence, desperate to understand exactly what was awakening. But the language was unstable, like an organism in mutation. With each attempt, new symbols emerged. Not human codes, not aliens. Something pre-linguistic, something alive. Kyle touched the main console, even against Sierra's protests. Instantly, an image flooded his mind. He saw not only Karen, but 7 shapes floating in the darkness, 7 hooves, 7 sleeping hearts. And at the center of them, an absence, an absolute void, so ancient that even time seemed to avoid it. A memory, not yours, but imprinted in space, whispered, "When gathered, they will remember. And when they remember, there will be no more songs in the stars. And when they remember, there will be no more songs in the stars." Kyle fell back, breathing heavily. Torin and Sierra ran to him. "Kyle, talk to me." He could only murmur, "They're not ships. They are not weapons. They are pieces. Pieces of something we tried to bury." Torin stood up, turning to the external screen, where the Karen still hovered, motionless but alive. And now, around her, a faint glow was emerging in the void. Other hooves, other presences, responding to the call. The awakening had begun, and no force in the galaxy was ready to stop it. The space around Draelkov was becoming a funnel of invisible forces. The Karen remained still, but the void around it vibrated like the taut skin of a drum about to burst. In the distance, more and more anomalous points of light appeared. Forgotten ships, ancient seals responding to the call of the first. Kale Rose stared at the Yarrow's visor, his jaw clenched. "If they gather," he said in a low voice, "what was fragmented will no longer be." "Do you still think we can stop it?" asked Torin Veldron, without sarcasm, just an irreparable weight in his tone. Kyle didn't respond immediately. Part of him wanted to believe so, but another part, the part that had seen what was hidden in the fragments of Charon, knew there was no turning back. Sierra Kova worked frantically at the consoles, trying to find a communication pattern, any way to break the activation cycle. "If we can generate enough interference," she began. "It won't work," Kale interrupted, his voice harsh. "It's not just technology. They are waking up because they remember. There's no way to cut a memory." In space, the formation of the SEAL ships took on an increasingly precise geometry, an incomplete circle. In the center, still empty, a low-density gravitational vortex was forming, an embryonic hole in the fabric of reality. Something was beginning to take shape there. Not matter, but intention. The Yarrow was violently shaken. Alarms echoed. The internal lights flashed blue and red. Torin held onto the support bars as he read the data appearing on the emergency panel. "We're not being attacked," he said, astonished. "The space itself is distorting, as if we were being pulled into a memory." "It's the vortex," Sierra said. "A reconstruction. They don't just want to wake up, they want to recreate what was lost." Kale felt his stomach churn. It wasn't just the awakening of the ships. It was the rebirth of what they had sacrificed billions to bury. With a sharp crack, the Yarrow lost propulsion. With a dry crack, the Yarrow lost propulsion. Without propulsion, without gravitational reaction, they began to drift toward the epicenter. Kale acted. "Let's go to Karen." Torin looked at him as if he had heard a blasphemy. Do you want to get us closer to her now? She recognized me, Kyle said. Maybe I can still... He didn't finish the sentence. Maybe what? Convince? Turn off? Deep down, he knew it was a desperate hope. Sierra activated the manual maneuver module. It was a suicide mission, but better than waiting for death. The Yarrow, using its last fragments of propulsive force, adjusted its trajectory and headed directly towards Karen. As they approached, the gravitational distortion field intensified. As they approached, the gravitational distortion field intensified. Cale felt it in his blood, as if every cell vibrated in a discordant note. Then, without warning, the Karen opened a passage. A luminous fissure cut through the hull like a pupil opening in a sleeping eye. On the other side, only darkness, and the feeling that the space inside did not obey normal laws. Last chance to back out, Sierra said, her hand hovering over the reversal control. Kyle tightened his helmet. We're in this now, for better or for worse. The Yarrow penetrated the opening. The interior of the Karen was not a ship. It was a memory space. Shapes floated in the internal void, fragments of lost worlds, voices recorded in streams of light, and battles fossilized in bubbles of frozen space. And at the center, pulsing like a sick heart, the origin. Kyle descended from the Yarrow without gravity, propelling himself toward the core. Images flooded his mind. Men and women, his ancestors, bleeding to feed the forge of the SEAL ships. Scientists and warriors building prisons with their own bodies, sealing horrors that the galaxy didn't even know how to name. A terrible choice had been made millennia ago. Now, the debt was being collected. Kyle found the core. It was a translucent sphere, suspended by filaments that looked like mixed muscles and circuits. Inside it, there was no light, only an absolute absence, a hunger. He placed his hand on the surface. The core responded with a wave of images, the fragmentation of the primordial being, the creation of the ships, the cost, and a final message, almost a whisper, almost a prayer. If we fail, let one of us remember and sacrifice whatever is necessary. Cale understood. They couldn't win, but they could delay the full awakening. Screaming against the pain that tore through his mind, Cale activated the final protocol stored in his own DNA, an ancestral command recorded by the first creators of the SEAL ships. Veritas interruptus. Karen trembled. Outside, the circle of ships trembled. The vortex hesitated. For a moment, just one. The awakening was interrupted, not prevented. Karen, as if wounded, closed the rift that had allowed them to enter. Yarrow was violently expelled into outer space. Cale fell to his knees inside the cabin, bleeding from his eyes. Sierra held him, shouting his name, but he just smiled weakly. "We didn't win," he whispered. "Just bought some time." And in the dark, as the stars flickered like candles about to go out, a fragment of lost memory persisted. A new word emerged in the intercepted communications across dozens of systems. Whispering Fleet. The Whispering Fleet. They were awake, and they were waiting. The Yarrow floated among the echoes. The emergency jump had failed. The ship had been launched by Karen with calculated brutality, pushed out of the activation geometry, but not destroyed. Not yet. Inside the main cabin, Sierra held Cale's hand. His body was weak, but his eyes were open, bloodshot, but aware. Torin watched the stars with the expression of someone who no longer trusted them. Since the incident, the galactic systems had plunged into silent chaos. No explosions, without open war, just withdrawal, fear, and denial. "You interrupted the ritual," Sierra murmured. "You stopped what the ships were doing." Kyle, entangled with support tubes, replied in a hoarse voice, "For now." On the outskirts of the galaxy, the Galactic Concord had sealed all routes near the coordinates of Karen. Entire sectors were under blackout protocol. Satellites shut down, civilian ships evacuated, and councils dismantled. The fear was ancient, ancestral, and now it had a name, Whispering Fleet. No official spoke openly, but the word was in all the shadow channels. The ships had moved. There were more of them than was thought. Some were asleep beneath buried moons. others disguised as orbital stations. Some, perhaps, had never slept. On Virelska, an archaeological planet of the Dre, a ship was discovered beneath a frozen ocean. When the divers tried to activate its generator, they were hit by a wave of memories. Battles that never happened, deaths that were never recorded, and a phrase repeated in dozens of voices: "Silence is a prison. Whispers are the sound of memory returning." Back at Yarrow, Kale sat in one of the containment capsules. His skin was marked, as if the very memory of Karen had left inscriptions on his flesh. Sierra couldn't sleep. If they move again, there will be no one to stop them. Kale stared at the ship's ceiling. They're not going to move again. Torin raised an eyebrow. Are you sure about that? Kale nodded. Yes, because the next step isn't theirs. It's from the one who woke them up. Sierra understood before Torin could ask. Someone, somewhere, received the transmissions from the Sasari. Someone who isn't afraid. Someone who will want to use this. In the command center of the Zarn Order, an empire unaffiliated with the Concord, a group of strategists watched the corrupted data from the Karen transmissions. They did not tremble. They did not retreat. They archived. Are you sure we can replicate the activation sequence? Asked the Arch-Executor. We have the DNA of the original transmitter and fragments of the mothership's neural code, replied a scientist. We don't want to control them. We want to integrate them. The Executor looked at the projection of the TNS Oblivion, now in silent orbit above a dying sun. Then it's time. May the next key be turned. Meanwhile, in an unmapped sector, something was lighting up in the dark. A cubic structure slowly rotated around a stationary black hole. Inside it, something listened, not with ears, but with time. A voice broke the silence, not coming from Karen, not from humans, but from the very fabric of space itself. The seal failed. Fragments align. We prepare to remember. Aboard the Yarrow, the three companions were about to part ways. Kyle planned to go to the planet Vorlin 5, where lost records of the unacknowledged war might have been preserved. Sierra had received mental signals from other ships, a call she couldn't ignore. Torin, although reluctant, knew that he had to return to the Concordance and alert those who still wanted to listen. In the hangar, before the separation, Sierra hugged Kale tightly. You gave us time. But time is just time, and that will want to be whole again. Kale looked at her. So let's use this time. To understand, to remember what we forgot. Because what is coming won't kill us. It will absorb us. And then, silence. But not the same silence as before. Now, the silence was vigilant. The SEAL ships returned to apparent dormancy. But their traces, their marks left on the fabric of space, continued to vibrate at a low frequency. And on a forgotten planet, where only rocks and storms were inhabited, a buried ship began to emit signals. Signals that were not picked up by sensors, but by minds. And among them, one mind was awakening differently. A boy, born with eyes that blinked in the same rhythm as Karen. He whispered words without a tongue, dreamed of wars he had not lived, and wrote with symbols no one had taught. The ships are voices. I am the ear.